So we are now holding on page Beis Amud Beis, page 2, side 2 in the Talmud in the Gemara Brochos. We're going to begin at the 2 dots, which is about 10 lines down from the top of the page. The first word on the line is Yuma, and then you have the 2 dots, or I'm sorry, Yoima, and then 2 dots, and then the word Amar. We're starting from the word Amar. Amar Mar, Master said. And as I mentioned, Master said always is bringing up something that we had just said earlier. At the time that the Koyanim enter to eat their truma, and that is the time for Kriya Shema, which is when stars come out. And then the Gemara asked the contradiction for a minhu, and they asked the contradiction, Me'emasai koirin as Shema bi'arvin, from when do we read the Shema in the evening? When the poor person, when the poor man enters to eat his bread and salt, until the time that he stands to to finish from his meal. And that is the 2 times, the beginning time and the end time of when to say Shema. The beginning time is, according to this brisa, is when the poor man enters to eat his bread and salt, and the end time is when he finishes his meal, is the end time of saying Shema. And so we mentioned that is obviously a different opinion than our Mishnah, because our Mishnah mentioned 3 opinions, and none of them mentioned such an early time would be the end time to say Shema. Our Mishnah had the time of 4 hours into the night, midnight, dawn, but here you have, it sounds like it's about a half hour into the night or so. And so this is definitely Seifa. The Gemara says Seifa, the end part of this brisa, it's called the Seifa. Every whenever there's a Mishnah or a brisa, often if there's 2 parts, so it'll divide it up and it'll discuss the first part and the second part. The first part is always called the Resha, which comes from the word Rosh in Hebrew, similar to the word Rosh, the head. And Seifa is similar to the word Saif in Hebrew. Saif means the end. So the Seifa here is the end part of the brisa. Vadai, for sure, Pliga Amasnisin argues on our Mishnah. Resha, the beginning part of this brisa, which says the time begins when the poor man eats his bread and salt, mi lema, should we say pligi amasnisin? It argues on our Mishnah. Or should we say that maybe it's the same opinion, just a different way of wording it? You could say when people enter to eat their truma, when the kohanim enter to eat their truma, and then you could say maybe if it's the same time, it's just using a different frame of reference, a different reference location, and saying it's when the poor man enters to eat his meal. Maybe it's the same time. So, but the Gemara doesn't know for sure. So it's asking, is this a different opinion or is this the same opinion as our Mishnah? So the Gemara, of course, likes to say that we would like to say that they all agree. So the Gemara says, Loi. It's not an argument. Ani v'kohen chad shiuru. Ani and the kohen are one shear, or one measure, meaning they're one time, the same time. They just used a different point of reference, but they're actually the same time. And that the reason why the Gemara is saying that is because if we don't have any proof otherwise, let's assume that they all agree. So the Gemara now wants to figure out if it's possible to say this. Maybe we can prove from somewhere else if there are different opinions at the of the beginning time of the Shema. So the Gemara says, Vera Minhu, and they asked the contradiction, so this we'll call Brisa 2. This is a second Brisa. In other words, we already brought a first Brisa that said the time is when the poor man enters to eat his bread and salt. And now comes a new Brisa. We're bringing up another Brisa. And as I mentioned, that the Brisas these are statements, these are discussions that were not brought in a Mishnah. Rebbe did not find them important enough, I guess, to include in his Mishnah, which is a book that's summarized. It's very very brief, very concise. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who compiled the Mishnah, he left out a lot of opinions and a lot of statements, and so they were all part of the Brisas. And I also had mentioned that the Tosefta, and this actually is a Tosefta. Toseftas are Brisas. They're really part of the Brisa category. They were not included in the Mishnah, and they were compiled by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi's students, and Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Hoshia. They both compiled what we know as the Tosefta, and that actually took on a form of a volume. There's a in the back of the Gemaras, very often they will print the Toseftas. They won't print all the Brisas. The Brisas are throughout the Talmud. You have Brisas that are quoted. These are statements quoted. There's no actual book that has a compilation of all the Brisas, but some of the Brisas were compiled by Reb Chia and Reb Hoshia. They're called Toseftas. So basically, the Gemara now brings this other Brisa, and it starts off Me'emasai, similar to the way our Mishnah starts off, similar to the other Brisa. Me'emasai, from when? Maschilin, do we start Likreis Kriya Shma Ba'arvis, to read Kriya Shma in the evening? When is the earliest time that one can read Kriya Shma in the evening? And the Brisa continues, and it says, Misha'a shebnei Adam nichnasin lechol piton ba'arvei Shabbos, when Bnei Adam, people, enter to eat their bread on Erev Shabbos, which means Friday night. When do people enter to eat their bread, meaning their meal, Friday night, which Rashi adds an interesting, important point, that this is obviously a slightly earlier time than maybe one would think, or maybe earlier than one generally would eat their meal, because he specifically mentions Friday night. So Rashi sees that there must be something that it's saying. Obviously, Friday night, people eat different time than during the week. And Rashi says it's earlier. And the reason why it's earlier, people rush to eat their meal because everything is already prepared on Friday night. In other words, you can't cook on Shabbos. So obviously they cooked everything before. And once a person is ready to eat the meal, in the olden days, that's when you would eat. So during the weekdays, you would have to wait till the meal is prepared. On Shabbos, it's already prepared. So people would eat their meal earlier. And so that is the first opinion of this brisa, of this, which is a Tosefta. This is the words of Divrei Rabbi Meir. These are the words of Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says, when regular people eat their bread on Friday night, the reason I say regular people, because before we mentioned a time that was connected to poor people, and now we're just mentioning Bnei Adam, any regular people, in general, people eat their meal Friday night. And the rabbis say, and it doesn't tell us the name of the rabbis, so it leaves it vague. Maybe it was a group of rabbis that was in this, discussion, and they said, when the kohanim are able to eat the truma, and that would be the time to say shema, simin ledavar, a sign for when this is. How would you know when the Kohanim are able to eat truma, or how would the Kohanim know when they are able to eat truma? A sign for this is Tzeis HaKochavim, is when the stars come out. So if the Kohanim want to know when they can eat truma, they can go outside and look for the stars. If you want to know when you're allowed to say shma, the sign, the Gemara gives us a sign for this, or this brisa, I should say, gives us a sign that if you want to know when the rabbis say you would be able to say shema, a sign for this would be when the stars come out. So this brisa, well, let's see what do we see so far from the brisa. Well, what we see is that there is a opinion of the rabbis that fits our Mishnah very clearly. Our Mishnah said when the stars come out, and this second brisa also says a time when the stars come out. We also see that there is an opinion of Reb Meir that argues. We don't know what time specifically he's referring to, because we don't live in those days. We don't know when people generally eat their meal Friday night. But we do know that there's obviously a second opinion. In other words, until now, we did not know that there's another view. Our Mishnah said a view when the stars come out. We brought a brisa number 1 that said a different time. It said it didn't use the same terminology. It said a time when the poor man eats his bread and salt, but we don't know if that's an argument on our Mishnah. So it could be everyone agrees with our Mishnah. Now we have a brisa that says 2 opinions, and one of them says like our Mishnah. That means the other one is obviously arguing. So now we've come to a conclusion that there definitely is an argument on our Mishnah, and one of the opinions that argues on our Mishnah is Rabbi Meir. And the brisa continues now, and it discusses the rabbi's opinion. How do the rabbis know that that this is the proper time that they're saying Tzeis HaKochavim when the stars come out? So it says V'afal pi she'ein raya l'davar, even though we don't have a proof that the day ends when the stars come out, and that's when you would be able to say Shema, even though there's no proof to this point that the day ends at when the stars come out. Zeicher l'davar, there is a indication for this. Shenemar, as it says, va'anachnu oisim b'malacha, and we are doing work, we are involved in work, and this is referring to the time when this is referring to a time when the Jewish people were rebuilding the second Beis Hamikdash. This is a verse from Nehemiah. And the Jewish people were rebuilding the second Beis Hamikdash, but they had a lot of problems from the enemies, I guess they were called the Kutim. The Kutim were a group of people that converted to Judaism, but then we found out that they were not sincere, and they were. We finally excluded them from the Jewish people, and they ultimately made a lot of problems for the Jewish people. And so we were doing work to build the Beis Hamikdash, and some of us were holding spears to guard the builders of the Beis Hamikdash, from the morning until the stars came out, from dawn until the stars came out. So that is one verse that says that we did work from until Tzeis HaKochavim. And then the Brisa brings another verse of V'omer, and it says V'haya lanu halayla mishmar v'hayoyim malacha. And the night we used for guarding, and the day we did the work. At day is when we worked. So the Gemara automatically asks, why do we need this second verse? My v'omer. What is this v'omer and it says? Why are you adding a second verse? So the Gemara says, v'chitema, if you will say, michi arva shimsha lel yahu, in other words, you'll ask when the sun set, that's when it's really night. and not when stars come out. You might ask on our verse. Our verse says that we did work until the stars came out. That's what the first verse said. And the Gemara is asking, that verse should be enough to tell you, well, we did work until the stars came out. It sounds like the night begins when the stars come out. That's what it sounds like from the first verse. And shouldn't that be a good enough proof? That when do you start saying Shema in the evening? When the stars come out, that's when the night begins and the day ends. But the Gemara says, no, it's not really a good enough proof. You need the second verse. Why do we need the second verse? Because you might say the sun, when the sun sets, that's when the day ends and the night begins, much earlier than when stars come out. You might say that really the day ends earlier. It ends at sunset. And those people that worked hard, that the verse that says that they were working until the stars came out, because they worked late. They were workaholics. They worked the machashri, they worked until very dark, and they worked very early in the morning. So, and that's why they started at dawn, not at sunrise. So maybe they just worked longer hours. So how do we know that the night begins when the stars come out? They worked until the stars came out. Okay, but that doesn't mean that the night begins then. Maybe the night begins earlier. They just were workaholics. Tashema, come in here. Now the Gemara says that's why we need that second verse. It says Ta Shema, come in and listen. Mishmar, we have a verse. It says in the night was for watching, guarding. And the day was to do work. We see that if the verse clearly says that we only worked by day and we did not work at night. So since it says that the night was for watching, the day was for working, in that same context, it's in that same chapter. So we see that when they worked until the stars came out, that means they worked until night. It's not that they worked into the night, they worked until night, because it says we only work during the day. So obviously when stars come out, that's really when the night begins. Now, Taisva says an interesting thing here. He says, why does the Brisa call this it's not a proof and it's only an indication? Why doesn't the Brisa say we have a proof from here that the night begins when three stars come out? And Taisva answers, he explains, he says that it's not a real proof because we're really talking, our Gemara is talking about Shema, and that verse has nothing to do with Shema. So it could be just because they're calling it day or night, it's not necessarily connected to Uvashachbacha Uvakumecha of Shema. That when we lie down, when you get up, that verse is not connected to Shema. So therefore, it's not really, it doesn't really tell us much about going to, the time people go to sleep or time people wake up so clearly. So therefore, the Brisa only said it's sort of like an indication, but it's not an actual proof. Now the Gemara is going to try to figure out the different opinions. So I mentioned it is a little complicated, this Gemara, because it tries to figure out when is the earlier opinions, when is we're going to try to figure out the other opinions. Are they arguing? So we mentioned already about the poor man eating his bread and salt. We mentioned an opinion of when the people eat their meal Friday night. And now we're going to bring another Brisa, we'll call it Brisa 3. And the Brisa 3 has a number of other opinions in it. So before we do Brisa 3, the Gemara does say that, so let's summarize what we've figured out so far. And what are the opinions? So the Gemara says here, Kosalka daitoch. It goes up in your mind. You can assume. The ani of Bnei Adam chaj, or the Gemara is saying we are thinking now that the ani, that the poor man time, Bnei Adam, and the regular people time, Friday nights, chad shiurahu. This is all one time. Of course, we want all the opinions to agree. We'd like to assume that these opinions agree. Now, the Gemara says, now if we're going to assume that the poor man's time and the regular person Friday night is the same time, the amrit ani v'koyin chad shiurahu, and if you want to assume, like you said earlier, that the poor man's time and the kohen eating truma's time is one measurement, is the same time. Chachamim hainu Reb Meir, the rabbis would then be the same opinion as Reb Meir. And what that means is that you can't win them all. We cannot say that all three of these are the same time. Again, we have a brisa that says two opinions. It has opinion of the rabbis, seis hakoychavim, when stars come out. It has the opinion of Reb Meir when regular people eat their meal Friday night. Now, those two opinions, regular people eat their meal Friday night, yeah. Now, those two opinions definitely argue. So now we're going to go to the poor man eating his bread and salt on a regular night. That opinion, who does that follow? So if you want to say that opinion is the same as the kohen eating his truma, which is when stars come out, if that's the same time, then you can't say that the poor man is the same time as the regular person Friday night, because you can't win them all. There's definitely an argument here. Reb Meir for sure argues on the rabbis. So again, we definitely can't say that the person, the opinion of Friday night people eating their meal is the same as when stars come out. That's for sure not. The question is the poor man. Who does that go like? Does that go like when stars come out, or is the poor man the same time as when as the Friday night? So let me read it inside again. V'i amrid, it's the first word on the line. And the Gemara is assuming that, let's say, the poor man eats his meal the same time that a regular person eats their meal Friday night. The Gemara is assuming that. And the Gemara says, V'i amrit, and if you're going to say that the poor man eats his meal the same time as the kohen eats his truma, if you're going to say that chad shiurahu, that's one in the same time, chachamim hainu Reb Meir, then the rabbis are going to be the same opinion as Reb Meir, and that can't be. Because in the same brisa, it says one view and it says another view. Obviously, they're arguing. So Ella, it must be, we have to divide these opinions up. We must say, Shma mina ani shiur l'chod b'kohen shiur l'chod, that the time of the poor man eating his bread is one time. The kohen eating his truma is a different time. So we're going to separate ani and kohen to be two separate times. Ani is the poor man, and the kohen eating his truma. Those are two separate times. But we can say that the poor man is the same time as the regular person eats his meal Friday night. So those two opinions we can agree. We can say fit together. But the opinion of the poor man and the kohen, we're going to have to separate. The Gemara says, no, why should you do that? Let's do the opposite. Let's put the poor man together with kohen. Like ani v'kohen chad shiuruhu. Let's say the ani and the kohen is one measure. Ani ubnei adam lav chad shiuruhu. So let's separate the ani and the bnei adam, the poor man, his time, and the regular person Friday night. Let's separate those. That's not the same time, but the poor man will be the same time as the kohen. Let's try to do that, because this way, the way I understand the Gemara, why does the Gemara want to do this? So my understanding is because our Mishnah we would like the questionable view to fit with our Mishnah. Let it fit with our Mishnah, it would be much, much better than it fitting with a different brisa. If it fits with our Mishnah, it's sort of, it would make sense that, that brisa, it would fit, it would flow well, because our brisa is the main view. We would like to see other views fitting with the main view. Okay, so the Gemara says, can you say that the poor man's time of eating his meal with salt, his bread with salt, is the same time as the kohen, which means seis hakoychavim, which means when the stars come out? V'reminhu, and now we have that third brisa that I was telling you about. And here we've got maybe 4 or 5 opinions. Some of them are repetitive, and some of them are new. V'reminhu, and let me ask you a contradiction. Yes.
Rabbi Smith,
yes.
How many lines down on the page are you?
Okay. I am now the last word on the line, and it's a little far from the top. So let's count from the bottom. I am maybe about 15 lines up from the bottom. No, a little more than that. Maybe about 20 lines from the bottom. The word is v'reminhu. The last word on the line, v'reminhu, and then the first word on the next line is me'emosai. Me'emosai maschilan. From when do we start likros to read kriya shma ba'arvin, the evening shema? Misha'a, from the time shekidesh hayoim ba'arvei shabbos, that the day is sanctified on Friday night. Now, this doesn't mean the time when people eat their meal Friday night. It means when the day is sanctified. And Rashi tells us, when is the day sanctified Friday night? The day is sanctified Friday night when we are not sure if it's night or not. The questionable time, it's called bein hashmasha, is that time that's questionable between day and night, that gray area. That on Friday night, we consider night. So we call it sanctified. So that starts at sunset. When sunset arrives, that's when we start being questionable, because we call it bein hashmashos, the time in between the evenings, meaning it's sort of like a gray period, and we will consider it night for Shabbos purposes, because we always are extra stringent when it comes to Shabbos, because of the severity of the laws of Shabbos and because it's a biblical law. So we want to be extra careful. So we follow any time that's questionable, and that's when Kiddush Hayoim Ba'arvei Shabbos, meaning when sunset arrives. That is the opinion, Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. This is the words of Rabbi Eliezer. That's when you start to say Shema in the evening. So in other words, what Rabbi Eliezer is saying is that people go to sleep at that time, or some people, or it's a beginning time for when people go to sleep. So therefore, that would be a time when you could recite the Shema. Rabbi Yehoshua says, Misha'a, from the time Sha'koyanim mutuharim, that the koyanim are purified, le'achol bitrumason, to eat their truma, which fits with our Mishnah. That's of course the time seis hakuchavim, when they are pure to eat truma, when they've gone to mikvah and the sun and the stars came out. That's when they are, that's when they're able to eat truma. So that fits with the views that we've seen before. Rabbi Meir Aimer Misha Sha'koyanim Toivlin. This is a new opinion. Rabbi Meir says in the time that the koyanim dunk le'achoil bitrumasan, to eat in their truma, which means when they go to the mikvah. Now, going to the mikvah is a little problematic, because we know that they go to the mikvah during the daytime. So how could you say Shema in the evening when they go to the mikvah? But this is what Rabbi Meir says. He says at the time when the koyanim dunk in the mikvah, in order to eat their truma later, that is a time when you can already start saying Shema. Of course, the Gemara now asks immediately, Amar Lai Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said to him, Rabbi Meir, he says, V'haloi, behold, koyanim mi'ba'od yoimim toivlin. The koyanim, from when it's still day, they are dunking in the mikvah. How in the world do you think you could say Shema when it's still day? This is not the time for Shema, for the evening Shema. Now, the Gemara does not answer this, the Brisa does not answer this question. We don't know here. It doesn't tell us what Rabbi Yehuda, what Rabbi Meir answered Rabbi Yehuda, but the Gemara will tell us what his answer is. We'll soon find out in the Gemara. But this is a continuation of the Brisa, and it continues. It says another opinion. Rabbi Chanina Omer. Rabbi Chanina says, Misha sha'ani nichnas, when the time when the poor man enters, lechol pitoi b'melach, to eat his bread in salt. So this opinion we already had before. Before we said the name of this opinion was Rabbi Meir. I'm sorry, not Rabbi Meir. Before we said a brisa with this opinion, with the poor man eating the truma, and we just said it's a brisa. This was the first brisa. It actually didn't have a name. I'm sorry. So Rabbi Chanina says this opinion, and before we had a brisa that said the same opinion about the poor man. So now we can assume that it's Rabbi Chanina earlier in the brisa that didn't say a name. We can assume now that is Rabbi Chanina. Okay. And
Rabbi Smith.
Yes.
Is something special being taught by the bread and the salt as his meal?
Why does it emphasize the salt?
No, why does it emphasize the bread and the salt? Why does it emphasize the meal of the poor man being bread and salt?
So, it's emphasizing the fact, two things. Number one is he doesn't have to prepare much. And that's why it's in a certain sense, it has to be like an earlier time than a regular person eats, because he's not preparing much for his meal. A regular person is, sauteing vegetables and cooking fish and meat and he just has bread and salt. So it's obviously earlier than a regular person. And additionally, it's telling you earlier when it mentioned it, it's telling you that his meal doesn't last that long because it's only bread and salt. And the earlier brisa gave an end time for Shema as a time when he finishes his meal. So by telling you that it's bread and salt, it tells you that obviously the end time of that meal is not going to be that far off from when it started. But here Rabbi Chanina is saying that view. It's in his name, and he doesn't mention the end time. This brisa is not talking about the end time, so we don't know, if that would, if Rabbi Chanina is for sure the person of that brisa. Could be two people had the same opinion, but it definitely makes sense that it could be Rabbi Chanina earlier. Ben, you had a question.
Rabbi,
yes.
Yeah, I wanted to say, I was thinking bread and salt means when you start your meal, you do a moitzi, that's bread and salt. Or challah and salt, depending on the meal.
Okay, but why does it say about the poor man eating his meal of bread and salt, and when it talks about regular people eating their meal, it doesn't say anything?
Well, the other people might eat a lot more than him after the bread, But
right. Right. So we're specifically mentioning that he has a small meal.
But for sure, he's going to eat bread and salt, at least.
Right. Okay. All right. So we're now in the bottom of the page. Rabbi Chanina, we just said his opinion that he when a poor man eats the bread with salt, and we're up to Rabbi Achai, which is probably about 12 lines up from the bottom. Yep, 12 lines up from the bottom. Rabbi Achai v'amrila Rabbi Acha. Rabbi Achai, and some say Rabbi Acha, Omer, Misha'a, from the time Sharoiv b'nei Adam, that the majority of people, Nichnasin lahasev, they enter to lahasev means to lie down and eat their meal. We know the word kulanu mesubin from the Haggadah on Passover, the Manishtana. We talk about reclining because in the olden days they used to recline when they ate. So lahasev is from the word reclining, and it refers to eating their meal while reclining. So Rabbi Achai, or some say it's Rabbi Acha, that opinion says from the time that the majority of people enter basically to eat their meal. There are two opinions if this refers to Friday night, or if it refers to any night when people eat their meal. If it refers to Friday night, then this would be going back to the earlier brisa, where we had an opinion of when do you start saying Shema? We said, Rabbi Meir says, from the time that people eat their meal on Erev Shabbos. So this would seem to be that same time that Rabbi Acha and Rabbi Achai are saying, if it's referring to Friday night. If it's referring to any night, then it's not the same time, because obviously Friday night was slightly different. As Rashi told us earlier, that Friday night they would eat earlier than the regular night. So Rashi brings down these two opinions. It's either Friday night, and then it would be the same opinion of the earlier statement, or it's a new opinion. So we've just concluded this this third brisa, and don't worry, this is all we've already stated all the opinions. So if you were confused, we're going to try to summarize it now and make it a little clearer. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, we need a clarification.
Okay, so in order to clarify, I'm going to share the screen, and you should be able to clarify. So let me share screen and see if this works. Let me see, it should work. Okay. Can everyone see this Word document? Can anyone hear me? Hello?
Yes,
Okay. Do you see this Word document?
I see.
Okay.
Yeah,
It says the earliest Shema. And we have the
Yes.
Mishnah's opinion, which may be Rabbi Eliezer, because we're not sure in the Mishnah if Rabbi Eliezer's statement is only referring to the second half of his statement, or if he's going on the entire Mishnah. But the Mishnah said when the stars come out. It said when Kohanim eat their truma, which we said meant when the stars come out. So that's the Mishnah's view. Then we have the Brisa 1, which didn't say a name. It said when poor people enter to eat their bread with salt. Then we have Brisa 2 that said two opinions. We have Rabbi Meir, who says when regular people eat their Friday night meal and everything is already prepared before, so it's a little earlier than the regular meal, the weekday meal. That was Rabbi Meir's opinion. And the Chachamim, the rabbis, say when the stars come out. Again, that fits with our Mishnah. So we had, then we have a third brisa that says, Rabbi Eliezer says sunset, when the day is sanctified because of doubt if it's night or not. So that is Rabbi Eliezer's view, that you can start saying Shema at sunset. Rabbi Yeshua says when the stars come out, that fits with our Mishnah. That goes back to our Mishnah's view. Rabbi Hanina says when poor people eat their bread with salt, that goes back to the first brisa. Rabbi Hanina and the first brisa seem to be the same. And then we have Rabbi Acha, Rabbi Achai, they say when the majority of people sit down to eat, which is two opinions, either daily or Shabbos. If it's Shabbos, then it would go back to Rabbi Meir's opinion, that Rabbi Acha and Rabbi Meir would be saying the same opinion. Or if they're talking about daily, then that would be an additional view. So we have these views of when a person can start saying Shema. What the Gemara is trying to figure out is brisa number 1, this brisa here, when poor people enter to eat their bread with salt, which opinion does that go with? We wanted to say that fits with our Mishnah when stars come out. But if you look at brisa 3, you'll be able to prove that that cannot be the same time as when stars come out. So take a look at brisa 1. Brisa 1 said when poor people enter to eat their bread with salt. that is when you can start saying Shema. It had no other opinions in that brisa. It just said that one view. And the Gemara would like to say that that fits with our Mishnah, but brisa 3 says you can't do that. If you look at brisa 3 well, you will see that it's impossible for the poor people to eat their bread with salt, to that opinion, to be the same opinion as when stars come out. Does anyone know why that is? Why can't, when poor people enter to eat their bread with salt, why can't that be the same time as when stars come out? How do you see it from the third brisa that that opinion of when poor people eat their bread with salt cannot be the same time as when stars come out? So the answer has to do with the fact that if two opinions in the same brisa are saying the same thing, then it would combine their views. It would say Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yehoshua say this, or Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Hanina say this. And because the brisa separates these different views, we must say that they are disagreeing. If the brisa separates these views, it must be that they're disagreeing. So look at brisa 3. Is any of the opinions in brisa 3 say when stars come out?
Yeah, Rabbi Yehoshua.
Rabbi Yehoshua, thank you. Rabbi Yehoshua says when stars come out. Does any of the opinions in brisa 3 say when poor people eat their bread with salt?
Rabbi Hanina.
Rabbi Hanina. Now, if Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Hanina agree, it would combine the two together and say Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Hanina say when stars come out, which is the same time as when people eat their bread with salt. It would combine the two. It separates them because they're obviously two separate opinions. So it's two separate times. You can't combine them because they are obviously two separate times. And now when we go back to brisa 1, let's look at brisa 1. So when poor people enter to eat their bread with salt, do you think that could fit, could be the same time as the Mishnah when it says when stars come out? Could that be the same opinion? Impossible, because the time is a different time, because we see that from brisa 3. So brisa 3 shows us that the brisa 1 cannot be the same time as the Mishnah. And that's what we've just proven. Does everyone see that? Would anyone like me to repeat that? Or does everyone understand?
Rabbi Smith, can I just say, Rabbi Smith,
Yes.
just a quick question.
Sure.
Let me see. I want to chart. Hold on a second. I don't know. The chart's gone while you're both, while I'm talking.
I'll open up the chart. I can open it again.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. My question was that if you have multiple opinions saying when the stars come out, you have Rabbi Eliezer, you have the Chachamim in brisa 2, you have Rabbi Yehoshua in brisa 3. So there's multiple opinions of when the stars come out. That's a very, very narrow amount of minutes when you compare it to the other categories of when poor people eat their meal, when the majority of people sit down to eat. Those are like very big ranges of time. You could have 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, half, saying this is when Shabbos ends, or this is when Shabbos begins, or when they say Shema. If you go outside and you count 1, 2, 3, I can see 3 stars, whether they're medium stars or small stars, whatever the criteria. That's going to be a specific narrow thing, unless it's cloudy. But you'll get a general idea. When is a good time to say Shema? When the stars come out is a very more narrow number of minutes, is what I'm trying to say.
So you're asking a good question. You're saying that some of the times are a little vague. And the reason why you're saying that is because we live in America when everyone does their own thing. But in England, there's something called tea time. and everyone at 4 o'clock, exactly at 4 o'clock, they have their tea. You know, when in the olden days, you know, there were certain traditions, you know, that were the common time. Like, you know, most people end work at 5 o'clock now, right? So there is such an idea. Now, of course, there's businesses that are open later, but you have the idea that, you know, so you have to understand that in those days, there was like common, these were common times that people just knew, you know, and they didn't have watches. So it couldn't, you know, it was a little harder to give an actual time, but they had an understanding of when, you know, when these times were, you know, when most people did certain things. And that was why the Brisa uses these examples. So again, to us, we think that you know, we can't relate to it because we're just so you know, free to do whatever we want, and we have lights. We don't have to worry about darkness. You know, it's a little, you have to like learn how to relate to the way the terminology was used then, when they didn't have watches and they didn't have light and they didn't have, you know, that it was a different ball game. So that's why, you know, it's hard to relate to. But it's not like these times the rabbi specifically wanted you to not know when it is. It was more clear in those days. At least that's my
Rabbi,
understanding. Yeah. Yes.
what about on a cloudy day? What about on a cloudy day when you can't see stars?
Well, you know, there are discussions in the Shulchan Aruch, which are, you know, what happens when it seems that it's dark and you lit Shabbos candles, and then all of a sudden the clouds go away and it's still daytime, and you know, that could happen. You know, it's discussed, and basically the conclusion, you know, that would be a question, you know, to ask. But the same thing would apply if you said shma, and then you realize that it's you know, it was an airplane that was flying above, and it really wasn't. Or now they have these, what do you call those things that are flying and taking pictures? You know, the
Drones.
drones.
A drone.
Yeah. So like the drones, you know, who knows? You might think that there's 3 stars out. Turns out that there's three guys playing with their drones, you know. And so, you know, obviously these type of things could happen, and you'd have to say Shema again when you realize the mistake. So it could happen, you know, that it's cloudy, and these were the challenges they had in the olden days. You know, people would light candles. I mean, nowadays it happens that you could light Shabbos candles a little early because let's say when we change the clocks, which we're doing this Saturday night, we're going to be switching the clocks. So next week, we actually have to light an hour earlier. What happens the opposite way? If you change the clocks the other way, and then you thinking that, you know, that we're still in the daylight savings, we're still in the regular time. And really, they changed the clocks, and you lit based on the previous week. You lit Shabbos candles, and it turns out that it's an hour early. An hour late is obvious, you can't relight. But an hour early, do you have to relight? And it turns out that it's based on Plag HaMincha. If you lit before Plag HaMincha is a certain time, an hour and a quarter based on the size of the day. In other words, if you divide the day into 12 parts, that would be the size of an hour. So some hours might be 70 minutes, some hours might be 50 minutes. Some days the hours are 70 minutes, some days the hours are 50 minutes, some days they're 60 minutes, 62 minutes, whatever it is. If you took an hour and a quarter before the end of the day, that would be the cutoff point for, not for Shema, but for accepting Shabbos early. So in any event, I think that really takes us to the, you know, that really gives us an understanding of how, you know, how they lived in those days. So does everyone understand did everyone catch the logic, how we just figured out that one of those brises, the poor man time, cannot fit with the Mishnah? Was that clear? Everyone understood that if you have a brisa with 2 opinions and they're arguing, it looks like they're arguing. So, you know, unless it combines the 2, we obviously realize that they can't be saying the same time. And if that's so, then even if they have a different brisa that says that same time, then obviously that opinion can't fit with the Mishnah. I see Manny just wanted to ask if we could email that the little paper that I wrote. If you like, I can email it. If some people might want to write their own notes, and I just wrote down.
I would like to receive it too.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll
Yes.
try. God willing, we'll try to email that out. Okay, we're going to stop here and pull out your Tanyas. I'm sorry, we're running into the Tanya time. So let's pull out our Tanyas. So you've already learned about the title page that it's called Likutei Amorim. Very interesting that the Alter Rebbe, the Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, the author of the Tanya, he called this Likutei Amorim a gathering of sayings, which is a certain sense very humble. He didn't emphasize that this is my own insights. I'm just gathering statements that were said by my teachers. And this is called Sefer Shel Beinanim, which means that the Alter Rebbe wrote another book called a book of Tzaddikim, of the righteous. And this book is called the book for the Beinanim. And of course, you've learned a little about what a Beinani is, and that it's based on the pasuk of Kikaroi Ve'lecha Hadavar Ma'id. Everything the matter is easy, is close to you, in your beficha, in your mouth, and in your heart to do it. And so the purpose of this sefer of the Tanya is to explain how it's close to you in a way that's long and short. Now, did Rabbi Cohen explain what that means, long and short? He did. Okay. So the next thing that's in the Tanya, before we actually begin the Hakdama, the introduction, is the Haskamas, the approbations from two rabbis, Rabbi Zusha of Anipoli and Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Leib HaKoyin. And they both lived in Anipoli, and for whatever reason, the Alter Rebbe wanted their two Haskamas to be in his Sefer, and it's commonly learned. When you learn Tanya, you actually read through them. So we're not going to spend that much time on it, but I do want to go through it. So if you have that page in front of you, the Haskama of the two Haskamas, and then there's a third Haskama of his, not really Haskama, but it's a third page about his kids, the Alter Rebbe's kids. I'm sorry? Yeah, let me mute everyone. So the first one is the Haskamas Harav HaChassid HaMaforsam Ish Aleki, the Haskama, the approbation of the renowned Rav and Chassid, Ish Aleki, a godly and holy Kadosh Yomerlai, a godly man should be called holy. Bareinu Rabbeinu, our guide and our Rav, our teacher, Rabbi Meshulam Zusi Me Anipoli. This rabbi who basically lived from 1718 until 1800 in Ukraine. Anipoli is in Ukraine. And Rabbi Zusha was a student of Rabbi Dov Ber, the Maggid of Mezrich. And he was a very humble man, very sincere, very authentic, very poor, and lived through a lot of suffering in his life. Family, his wife, sick, and he had a very tough life, and yet he always loved Hashem and always was joyous. And the few of his teachings that have survived, we don't really know much of his teachings, but they are collected. Some of them are collected in a sefer called Meneiras Zahav. In any event, The Haskama continues. Hine beroisi asaksavim shel harav hai goin. I've seen the writings of this Rav, referring to the Baal, the Baal Tanya, or the Alter Rebbe. Hai goinish olakim, this goin, genius, godly man, kadesh v'tohar, holy and pure, aspaklaria hameira. Aspaklaria hameira is a term used for a magnifying glass or a clear. He had a visionary that can see far, can see aspaklaria hameira, like maybe like a binoculars. V'toiv asher asa, and he has done good work. Asher hifli Hashem chasti, and God has performed wondrous kindness. And he v'nasan b'libay hatohar la'asos es kol eila, and has inspired the author's heart to do all this work. Laharis am Hashem, to show Hashem's people, Hashem's nation, Brochos hakdoshim, his holy ways. And the author did not want to submit these writings to publish because it's not his style. He doesn't care to show off his knowledge, and he wasn't interested in actually writing them down. He would like to speak to people and in a personal level, and also he didn't care to get publicity. But only because of the pamphlets that were disseminated, B'karev Kol Yisrael, they were disseminated amongst all of the Jewish people with many different copies, and because of the many mistakes as a result of numerous copies, there were numerous errors, and we needed to bring them into a official publication. So because of basically there were numerous mistakes that crept into the publication, and that was what was a big problem, because this book was a book of the Hasidic, you could call it the Bible of the Hasidic movement, and if it had mistakes in it, it did not look good for the Hasidim, because if there were certain mistakes that could be major, it would look very negative against the Hasidim. Additionally, we are aware that there were some mistakes that were intentionally printed by the anti-Hasidim in order to make people not respect this book. So therefore, the Alter Rebbe made a official printing of it, and by making the official printing, which obviously is a huge expense, it limited the ability of the other, these little publications that were just simply printed for people to want to forge and include mistakes in it in order to discredit the validity of this tremendous book. So that's where we're going to conclude now, where the Rebbe Zusha of Anipa gave his haskama. If anyone would like to ask any questions.